Hey guys, today I'm going to be reading 8th grade Bites the Chronicles of Vladimir Todd. Uh, Excuse me if I get a little illiterate at sometimes, and if I stutter, excuse me. Um, so I'm gonna try my best. So here we go. Chapter 1. Where's the boy? A tree branch slapped John Craig across the face, scraping his skin, but he kept on running and ignored the stabbing pain of needles on his bare feet. He could hear the man's footsteps behind him, echoing his own. The man was getting closer. A fallen tree branch grabbed John's ankle and he fell forward. Time slowed to a crawl. His face neared the leaf-covered ground and cold air whisked across his skin. His heart drummed in his ears. The man's pace quickened, and just as John's cheek smacked against the earth, the stranger grabbed a fistful of John's hair and pulled his head back. John screeched, "What do you want from me?" But his attacker did not answer. John swung his arm behind him to knock the man down, but his hands were caught effortlessly in the air and bound behind him. A hand gloved in shiny black leather entered his field of vision, clutching a torn page from Bethori Gazette. John's head jerked back as the man gave his hair a violent tug and growled, "Where is he?" At the corner of the paper there was a grainy image of a 13-year-old boy John knew well. The boy was surrounded by several of his peers and teachers, but looked nervous, awkward at the bottom of the photo. A caption read, left to right, Kelly Anbrook, Carrie Anderson, Haley McMullen, teacher John Craig, Vladimir Todd, Edgar Poe, Mike Brennan. At the top was a bold title, Debate Team Sure to Win Regionals. Tears coated John's cheek and he shook his head refusingly to answer. Something warm and slick ran down John's forehead through the red-tinted glass. He looked at the forest around him, then he screamed for help until his lungs burned. But help wouldn't come. "Where's the boy? Where's Vlad?" John wriggled. The man's face was near his. Cold breath beat down on the back of his neck, and something sharp gazed across his skin. "Tell me or die." John opened his mouth to speak, but it was too late for lies. The man bit down. Fangs popped through John's skin, cutting deep into his neck. Chapter 2. Halloween. Vlad turned to his side, admiring his image in the mirror with a smirk. Henry was going to close it when he saw Vlad's costume. They hadn't discussed what they were dressing up as, but the pathetic black nylon cape and plastic fangs that Vlad picked up at the Stop and Shop last weekend were sure to be the running gag of the evening between them. He brushed his hair back from his eyes and slipped the plastic teeth into his mouth. They fit perfectly over his own fangs, which were prodding slightly. Despite his large dinner, not an hour before, Aunt Nellie had warmed two sizable steaks until the blood dripped from the raw meat. He restrained himself from picking up the steaks with his bare hands and ripping them, but only because Aunt Nellie insists on manners. So even though it agonized him to do so, he took his time, cutting the steaks into 2 medium bites. and sucking the juices into his hungry mouth drip before dropping the dry, tasteless meat onto his plate. He pulled the fake teeth out of his mouth and examined the sharp point of his fangs. "Aunt Nolly, you better get a snack pack ready." "But you just ate," came a lisping voice from the bottom of the stairs. "Oh well, better safe than sorry. I suppose. What time will Henry be here?" "Any minute." Satisfied with his costume, Vlad turned from the mirror. The old floorboards creaked beneath his sneakers. He kissed his fingers and pressed them to the frame on his dresser. In the photo, his mother was poised on the edge of an old Victorian chaise, with his father standing behind her, his pale hands on his shoulder. They were smiling at the camera. Vlad found himself smiling back at them. He opened the top drawer and stuffed $10 from a secret box into his pocket. Parting with Henry had taught him one thing, above all: be prepared. Vlad left his bedroom and made his way down to the stairs. Aunt Nellie stood at the bottom, holding up a plastic container covered with saran wrap. He could see the deep red slushy contents through the wrap and licked his lip. "Did you microwave it? It's better warm." "It's warm enough." She handed it to him, widened her eyes in disgust as he bit through the saran wrap and slurped. "Use a spoon. You'll get it all over the rug, and I just had it cleaned. Between that rug and your shirt, the dry cleaner thinks we're either accident-prone or axe murderers. And take it easy on the snack packs tonight, Mr. Midnight Feeder. There are only 2 left. I better bring some more blood bags from the hospital tonight and fix up enough for the rest of the week." "Did you get O positive this time?" "That's my favorite." She nodded and he smiled, brushing past her into the kitchen. He was spooning a big sweet glob of half-frozen blood into his mouth when the doorbell rang. With a hurried swallow, he dropped the empty container into the biohazard box beneath the sink, and he popped the plastic fangs into over his shrinking fangs. Blah. With careful steps, he snuck over to the wall just to right away of the archway and peeked over to the front door, where his aunt was greeting Henry with a hug. Vlad jumped out from behind the separating wall and held up his cheap cape out with both arms. "I want to suck your blood." Henry doubtful over, roaring with laughter. When he straightened, he slapped Vlad on the shoulder. "That's a sweet costume. Check me out. You'll just die." Henry placed his fist on his hips in a pseudo Superman pose, and when he turned his head, Vlad's jaw dropped at the sight of 2 small holes on Henry's neck. "No way!" He stepped closer to inspect Henry's bite marks. They were flawless. Vlad had only seen one actual vampire bite on a human before, and Henry's handiwork was very close to the real thing. "What did you use?" "Silly putty and raspberry jam." "Seedless?" "Well, duh. Can't have seeds in my wound. Might get infected." Aunt Nolly regardless Vlad with a concerned glance over the top of her glasses. "Did you get enough to eat?" Vlad nodded, stuffed a tube of his sunscreen into his pocket, and opened the door. "Party's over at midnight." Aunt Nolly held out her hand. "You won't need that. I want you home by 11. 11? At times, Aunt Nolly. could be ridiculously overprotective. Vlad rolled his eyes and dug the tube back out, slapping it into Aunt Nolly's hand. But no one else is going to be leaving early. And besides, at midnight there's supposed to be some big surprise. Nellie looked at Henry for confirmation. He nodded enthusiastically. We can't miss it. Well, she bit her lip in complimentation. And after what seems like an eternity, she sighed. All right, but stick together, and if you get hungry, give me a call on my cell. I'll be at Deb's until late. Henry nudged Vlad with his elbow. Matthew called me earlier. Said Medrith would be there. Vlad shot him a look that screamed, "Shut up!" And they bounded out the door, vampire and victim. Nellie called after them, "Be careful, boys!" Other than that, the fake wound, Henry was dressed as normal as was the pair of ratty-looking sneakers on his feet. He gave Vlad a sly glance. Big thing at midnight, huh? Vlad shrugged and adjusted the cape around his shoulders. I'm a creature of the night, for God's sakes, and she wants me home by 11? I don't think so. Why doesn't she just follow me to the party and kiss me goodbye? Hey, don't knock it. If it weren't for Nolly, you would never get kissed. Vlad slowed his steps. Like you have room to talk. Henry shrugged. I've kissed plenty of girls. I'm not talking about your mom, dork. They turned down Elm, and at the end of the street, Vlad could see cars stopping in front of Matthew's house. A blur of people moved from vehicle to house, and Vlad felt a twinge of a nervous settle into his muscles. The headlights from one of the cars that been in front of Matthew's house turned toward them, blinding Vlad temporarily. Henry had shoved his hands into his pocket and walking with his attention keenly focused on the sidewalk. Neither am I. I'm talking about girls like Carrie Anderson and Stephanie Braun. Stephanie will kiss anyone. Yeah, I know. Henry's smile returned. Her sister's cute, though. Vlad raised an eyebrow, half chuckling. Dude, that's gross. She just turned 12. So? Henry grinned broadly. So, you'll be 14 in 2 months. It's gross. Vlad shook his head, looking down at his right shoe where his toe was poking through the tear. Impossibly. Henry's grin broadened. She's nice. Whether or not a girl will kiss you isn't the measure of how nice she is. Ahead, Vlad could see a hint of a soft blue sweater and angel wings disappearing into Matthew's front door. Medrith. He overheard her in third period, yesterday, gushing over what she planned to wear it was the moment that he decided to accept the invitation to the party, last minute or not. So what is it, Einstein? Vlad stopped in his tracks. Henry stopped walking as well and tilted his head at the curious gleam in his eye. Vlad nodded and said, girls that make out in the back of the band room aren't nice. I never told you it was the band room. Henry furrowed his brow and grabbed Vlad's shoulder for a second, lowering his voice so eavesdroppers couldn't hear. Dude, don't do that freaky mind-reading stuff. I hate that. Vlad shrugged and kept walking. Henry nudged Vlad with his elbow to gesture a group of 3 trick-or-treaters in front of them. With a nod, want some candy? I shouldn't. Nellie still ticked about last year. Vlad shoved his hands in his pocket and looked from his best friend to the kids on the sidewalk. You know, those kids told their parents that they were attacked by a vampire, and that idiot Officer Thompson started asking my aunt all sorts of questions. If people find out about me, about what I am... Oh, come on! Henry had stepped in front of him, partially blocking Vlad's view of the receding fourth graders. Two were dressed as superheroes of some sort. The third wore the same cape that Vlad had on. It'll be funny, besides. If you don't do it, I'm totally telling Medrith that you like her. Henry turned around and wrapped his arm around himself, making kissing sounds. Vlad seethed. Dude, not cool! The grin on Henry's face made it clear that he wasn't about to let a good gag go without a fight. With a shaking head, Vlad relented. If we get caught, you owe me. Big time. Henry beamed. And I did that without any of the special powers normally associated with best friends of the undead. Henry stepped to his side and Vlad moved past him, ducking through the tall bushes that lined with the sidewalk. Vlad ran as quietly as he could until he stood half a block ahead of his costume victims. After shimmying up an old tree, the bark rough on his hand as he climbed, Vlad scooted out onto a long, thick branch and waited for the fourth graders, while Henry stayed behind the bushes. He could feel Henry's approving eyes on him and had to stifle a chuckle. As the superheroes and their vampire comrade approached the tree, Vlad perched in with fingers clutching pillowcases filled with sugary treats. Vlad popped the plastic fangs out and stuffed them into his front pocket. He let his imagination wander a bit through rivers of blood and hunger that screamed to be satisfied, touching the lips of his tongue to his newly exposed fangs. He leaned forward until his feet slipped from the branch. Wind brushed his hair back from his face as he descended, and then, with a flicker of concentration, Vlad willed his body forward, arms outstretched, his fangs exposed, his throat releasing a low, guttural growl. He floated closer to the boys until he was just above their heads, and screamed. The superheroes dropped their pillowcases and bolted, a blur of capes and shrieking in terror. The vampire was left behind, staring up at Vlad in horrified moment that dragged on forever. Vlad screamed again, and so did the boy. Finally relinquishing his hold on the bag, he was frozen to the spot. Vlad wondered if he would ever run away. Vlad could hear the boy's heart pounding against his ribs, a loud thunder echoing through his mind. He heard the whoosh of rushing blood, and the boy's tightened panic in his own chest. Then a blink. Vlad saw himself floating down, cheap plastic cape fluttering behind him, bright, sharp fangs shining in the streetlight. The urge to wet his pants was undeniable. But what would Mark and Todd think if they saw? But then why should he care what they thought? They were mean jerks. They had run away without him. And when they found out that he was dead the next day, they'd feel awful and deserved to. Hey guys, this is where I'm going to stop. The finishing up of this chapter will be probably tonight when I'm extremely bored, which I technically am. So, Hope you enjoyed your time. I hope you've actually liked this book so far. And just one more thing. Hobby ho, let's go!